Beijing 2022. Human Rights on Ice.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. As the Olympics take place in Beijing, we've been focusing a segment each day on the repressive nature of that communist regime and their abuse of human rights. China's restrictive one-child policy led to millions of abortions and abandoned children, but it's morphed into a three-child policy. Now, does that suggest that the regime has changed its view on the value of human life? Joining me now is FRC's Mary Szoch. She's the director of our Center for Human Dignity. Mary, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony.
So let me put that question to you, Mary. We went from this one-child policy, which lasted for decades. Now they've morphed into a three-child policy. Did they somehow see the light and the value of human life?
Unfortunately, no. When China began their one-child policy in the late 1970s, early 1980s, what we saw was a lot of propaganda about how, only having one child would make China a prosperous and powerful nation. Well, what China has realized is that a nation without people without children is a nation without hope. And there's not hope for the future in China. They've seen all sorts of unintended and unexpected side effects there, such as an increased suicide rate among elderly members of their society. They've seen an increased infertility rate among child age bearing women. And they've seen, as we expected, their population has declined. The Chinese Communist Party sees people as a tool to serve the government. They believe that people were created to serve them instead of to serve God. And their expansion to a three-child policy is no more than another attempt to use people as a tool to serve the government.
Now, Mary, I'm tempted to say, how could you miss this when you go to a one-child policy and it led to sex selection abortions, where we saw families that would abort girls because they wanted boys, especially in the rural areas of China, because they work and they can provide income. All of a sudden you have this imbalance between male and female. I mean, you would think, we could see that as plain as day. But, we have to realize first, America has done a lot of the same things with our embracing of unrestrained abortion all the way through the 9th month of pregnancy. We are suffering from these, I would say, unintended consequences. I'm not sure that they're unintended by everybody, but certainly by most. So, we got to be careful about criticizing China on this point, because in some ways, our policies have gotten worse in the times that we've been challenging China on their one-child policy.
They actually have, and you point out an interesting fact, Tony, which is that in China, actually, since 2001, sex-selective abortion has been illegal there, and it is because of the number of baby girls that have been killed since the one-child policy was instituted. In the United States, there is no national law protecting life of any sort in the womb. And while, of course, we know that the motives of China behind this are not that they believe in the dignity of every little baby girl in the womb, we know that their motives are to serve their government. But here in the United States, we need to be very cautious pointing the finger at China, because we certainly can see here that we have allowed our culture to do the same thing that the Chinese government has done. We have allowed our culture to tell women, if you don't have children, you will be prosperous. If you don't have children, you will advance your career. If you don't have children, you will succeed. That's what the Chinese government has said since the 1980s, and that's what American culture has said since 1973.
Well, it goes back to a utilitarian view of human beings. That, as you said, they're there to serve the Chinese Communist Party. Well, while we don't have a Communist Party leading America, you see the same arguments when they embrace this whole green agenda that somehow children consume our limited resources. Therefore, if you have more than one or two, you're being irresponsible here in this country. So it's getting away from that understanding that every child is created in the image of God, and therefore they have inherent value, and they should be welcomed into the world and protected under our laws. I would argue, Mary, that in this area, because we've embraced China as an economic partner, once again, we see an area where America has been more influenced by China than we have influenced China.
Absolutely, Tony. And one thing that Americans should recognize is that abortion was first legalized by the communist country of Russia. That was the first place where legal abortion took place, and it was used as a tool to dismantle the family. It was used as a tool to give the government control. Here in the United States, when we tell families how many children that they should be having, and when we try to make the family serve the economy instead of the other way around, as President Biden has tried so hard to make sure that we have mothers in the workforce, because mothers have to be serving the economy instead of the economy making life easier for mothers. When we do that, we're doing nothing but mirroring the communist nations.
Yep, just different words, but the same view of children and human life. Mary Szoch, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony.